Hey team, Katie here from Equestrian Movement, and today we're going to be talking about how to create safe horses that want to look after us. So this is a pretty loaded topic. I have basically spent my lifetime working towards this, coming from that riding school environment. And when we're looking at picking up horses, we've picked them up from the doggers, so
want to look up.
not knowing their history, where they came from, what they were doing, that kind of thing. We would put quite a lot of work into the horses to ensure they were safe for our beginners to ride and to look after our kids, and taking beginner lessons through to intermediate. They never you don't get a horse and put them straight into a beginner lesson. There's quite a period of training, and we would start these horses with our most experienced riders and then take them out of the school, do some refining, put them back in the school, and then slowly integrate the less experienced riders onto them until our horses were really confident with looking after their humans. I've talked about this before, but the school horses are really special horses. It takes a lot of confidence to be able to ignore the messiness of a beginner and to tolerate the unbalancedness of a beginner, but then also be able to tune in and tune up in sensitivity and athleticism to more experienced riders learning more difficult movements and whatnot. So our school horses, are they really do a good job of what they're used for. So I wanted to talk a bit about that today, is like, how do we create a horse that wants to look after us? And you've probably heard us talk a lot about building a relationship and a connection, and this is the key. So if you're thinking, if you're using submission-based training methods, control-based training methods, and you're trying to control the horse, and you expect them to listen to you because you have a certain level of submission, our horses are very big, so it's very difficult to be in a situation with a 400 plus kilo animal, thinking that we can actually control them. So in my opinion, the secret sauce, the gravy, is being in a position with your horse where you are not trying to control them and you're not creating submission, and as a result expecting them to look after you. Because of that, you're creating a relationship with your horse and a connection with your horse whereby they want to look after you because of the quality of the relationship that you've built out. And I think that, for those of you that have had a heart horse and had that experience with, having that depth of relationship and connection, that's what we're really looking for when we are working with our animals. Otherwise, we'd be riding motorbikes. If we wanted to have something that just did as it's told, even motorbikes don't always do as they're told, but if we wanted to have something that just did as it's told and the buttons worked every single time, then we should be operating machinery. If you want to have a relationship and a connection and, really have that beautiful experience of a relationship with the horses that we can have, then that comes with allowing the horse's unique personality and identity to blossom and shine, which sometimes doesn't always look like what we want to be dealing with. So this is where the tricky bit starts. So when we're building a relationship and a connection with your horse, that is, I believe, the most effective way to train horses to be safe, especially if you're not a professional trainer. So if we're talking about, being a professional trainer and being able to, swing off of the 800 kilo horses to establish submission based training. Maybe that connection is kind of lost in that moment. But if you're, a beginner just starting out, or an intermediate rider that's, hobby riding on the weekends, or only riding a couple of days a week with your horse, if you're, not necessarily athletic and fit yourself, if this is like your first horse, or if you've just got a new horse, or other situations. If you're young, so if you're young, you're unbalanced in the saddle, you physically cannot control the horse. I think that I started to feel strong, athletic, fit in the saddle, and to be able to, hang on to a horse having a dummy spit after, by the time I was riding professionally and I was riding 7 horses a day. Like, that was when I stopped getting a stitch when I was training, when I would stop getting fatigued. It was like that moment where my body just adapted to, this is life and this is how we roll. And so up until that point, if I was training heavily and competitively, but it was just one horse, and I was riding 5 days a week, competing on the weekends. And that's heavy riding, really, but it was just one horse. So that level of intensity of riding still, I don't feel, had me strong, fit, athletic enough in the saddle to, actually physically be able to be in control of what the horse was doing, or making, the horse do anything it didn't want to do. So if you're not in a situation where you physically can't make the horse do what you want it to do, then it's got to come from the quality of relationship and the connection that you have with your horse, that they want to look after you. And so this is like a lot of the things that we can see if you're following trainers on YouTube or Instagram or that kind of thing. If they are professional trainers that are riding, every day up to 10 horses, then you're not going to be able to ride the same way that they can ride. That's just going to be the truth there. I'm sorry if you didn't want to hear it, but to be able to be putting 10 hours a day into the saddle as a professional rider, they are definitely going to be more athletic and fit, and in more control of their body, and better in their communication. But that doesn't mean that you can't do it if you're just starting out, if you're only riding once a week, if you're not, even if you're only riding one horse, but you're riding every day. The difference is that you need to have that relationship there and that connection there, where you have a level of cooperation that isn't because you are in control of the horse or have submission. And I think that this is a really big learning curve for us as riders and for beginners and whatnot, is that it's that fear of being out of control on the horse. And so once you get to that level of riding that many horses and being a professional trainer and whatnot, that fear is gone, because you recognize that you aren't in control of the horse. And so you're looking for other ways of like getting along and working together, and it being a positive experience for the two of you. But for those of us that are still, in those stages of being, scared of hurting yourself and fear of falling off and whatnot, we can be looking for ways to better control our horse and to create more submission, to try and make our horses safer for us. But the more submissive horses and the more controlled horses don't necessarily make safer horses. They don't necessarily make them safer for us. It's having a horse that actually wants to look after you that makes the safe horse. And that takes a really long time to build out a relationship with your horse. And it means that sometimes, you don't get the buy a horse and go straight out to competitions and rally days and whatnot. It can mean like a year at home, just getting to know each other and getting to understand what works and what doesn't work, and how that horse prefers you to do things, and what are the quirks to their personality. What do they like? What don't they like? How do they like to learn? How do you motivate that horse? What does it do if it's overstimulated? What does it do if it's understimulated? What does it take to get it engaged, interested, motivated, and working with you? Understanding that horse from the inside out is the best place to start building out a connection and a relationship. And when your horse feels heard and you can say, yes, I hear that this is how you would prefer us to do it, then that's when you start to build out trust and confidence in you to handle them. So if your horse likes you and wants to look after you, you don't need to force your horse's submission to look after you. So what we try to do is we start from that place of developing mental relaxation. And so through mental relaxation, we can start introducing compassionate leadership. So that's where we set expectations and boundaries with our horses to make sure that they are then not trying to bully and push us around. So we establish, just a little bit of like, this is what I expect of you. Please don't bite me. This is what I expect of you. Please don't go over the top of me. Please don't push me around. Please don't drop the shoulder into me. Please don't swing your butt at me. Those kinds of things that are just not appropriate behaviors for our horses to work with us around. So we establish the mental relaxation so that we can have that conversation with the horses without antagonizing them. And then we can develop horses that enjoy learning and ask to be ridden. And we're doing this without using submission-based training methods. We're doing this without trauma triggering training methods. We're doing this in a way that allows the horse's individual personality to blossom, because we're asking them, how do they want to be worked with? So what is connection? If we're talking about building out a relationship and a connection, what is connection? So we can talk about our bond with our horse, and that is basically a similar thing to relationships in general, is that the experience of being together fires oxytocin between us and our horse. And so it doesn't start out there. You're not going to, some of us have instant attractions to our horses and instantly fall in love with them and feel that love as soon as we see them. In my case, I had to work at that. So establishing the bond, and the strength of the bond is like, how much do you love your horse and how much does your horse love you, and how strong is that love to how far can you push the boundaries, I guess, is how it works. Like, when do you break that oxytocin bond? When have you asked too much of your horse? So that's why we start with relaxation, because that's a good place, emotional place to start from with our horses. And then from there, we can start building love relationships, building out oxytocin. But sometimes setting expectations with our horses is going to break that bond a little bit and drive that wedge in. And so it's important that we just come to that place where we circle back around and reestablish that connection with the horse. So what is connection? If you're looking at your horse and looking at how your horse is going to work with you, the most important thing to look for with a connection is, do you command your horse's attention? And so command doesn't need to be forced, doesn't need to be bullied, doesn't need to be spooked, doesn't need to be, I command you to pay attention to me. You can pay attention. You can command your horse's attention from the way that you hold yourself, the way that you are around your horse, the way that you behave, the way that the pair of you work together. So figuring out how you command your horse's attention is key. We've got plenty of examples of different training methods to command our horse's attention. But before we go into it, we can just talk a little bit about what it looks like when we have our horse's attention. So the biggest thing for commanding our horse's attention is eye contact. If your horse is giving you eye contact and approaching you when they're at liberty, then they're giving you their full attention. When your horse chooses to look away from you and stops giving you eye contact, then you're developing a sense of disconnect between you and your horse, and that's where the wedge is starting to drive in. And so when you pick up on these body languages where your horse is starting to excuse me, create that disconnect between you and them, that's when you need to circle back around, stop asking what you're asking of them, and say, okay, I can see that you're losing interest, or you're getting worried or nervous or uncomfortable, and ask them, how can I ask this of you better? Is there something that I need to address, that you don't want to say yes to this? Is it just that you don't want to work? Or is there an underlying pain issue that I need to address? So that you can start digging in and unraveling what your horse is, shutting you out about. That is the key. So does your horse look at you? Does your horse approach you? Does your horse follow you? Is your horse feeling safe enough to relax around you? Even better, does your horse feel safe enough to sleep around you, especially sleeping on the ground? Are you able to then also maintain your horse's attention into the exercises that you want to do with your horse? So that's the groundwork exercises, understanding where that level of pressure is and how you're going to reward and motivate them, and then into the saddle. So there's plenty of examples of different ways that different trainers will command their horse's attention. One of the most common things that we get told in the horse industry, and I think that this is a very fear-based approach for us, is are you scarier than the things your horse is scared of? So if you feel that you have to command your horse's attention by being scarier than the things that they're scared of, then I believe that there's a missing link there in regards to what a connection and a relationship with a horse looks like. We see this quite a lot in natural horsemanship and with the flag. So, flicking and flapping the flag to get the horse's attention on you. You're commanding their attention by, startling them a little bit, spooking them a little bit, and saying, hey, look at me. So that's a really intensive way to go into a relationship with a horse. If your horse is always giving you their attention because they're a little bit unsure of whether or not they're in trouble, or they're a little bit worried about what you're going to ask them to do, or if they're a little bit, scared, spooked, or startled into responding to you, then you're always going to have that response from the horse. And if we're talking about building out safe horses for beginners, I don't necessarily believe that this is the most effective tool that we can use. Are you showing awareness of their environment and creating a safe space so they can relax and listen? So this is one of our key ways of getting our horse's attention, is by showing up for them within their environment and saying, hey, I've got watch, you relax. And so while you watch their environment and they relax and let you kind of mind them while they relax and have a sleep, then they're going to give you their attention because they no longer are worried about their environment, because you've got care of that for them. So then if they can relax and not have to worry about their environment, then you have much more of a chance of them listening to you. And so you can ask them from there, look at me, follow me, be with me, ask me questions. And that's where we start to open up that pathway of communication. So creating a safe space for your horse to relax in, kind of going to be the opposite of what we do when we're doing really high pressure submission-based training methods, especially if that's all you're doing and you're not doing any other work with relaxation and connection. So the relationship, this is a little bit what we were talking about with those oxytocin bonds. Is your horse so enamored by you that they can't help but to keep their focus on you? So, this is a horse that's a little bit obsessed with you, and they follow you everywhere they go, and they're yesing everything you ask, and they're super people pleasers. We kind of tend to lose this temperament in submission based training and with horses that have had, submission based training and just control based training. And so a lot of people have never actually experienced this in a horse. And as a result, they don't actually realize that it's possible. This happens a lot if you start a young horse yourself and you create a really safe environment that your horse is able to thrive in. And you're providing, that situation where they can just gain confidence without creating like pushiness. So that confidence where, that self-assuredness, that are really comfortable in themselves without having to feel like they need to push you around or bully you or whatnot. This is an ideal situation, but our typical industry standards don't really support this, because we need to start with a really good weaning process with our horses so that they're developing secure attachments outside of the mother foal bond. And then we want to create really secure attachments within their environment and their new herd so that they can learn social cues and integrate into a herd socially. And then, really building out the quality of relationship with their human without fear of getting moved on, and their environment, that of like their base environment, so where they live, changing like all the time, and they have to, find a new area within their environment that they feel safe to relax in, and their herd members changing all the time. If we don't provide that stability for the horses to be secure within their herd and their environment, then they aren't going to have this like real calm curiosity that horses tend to have if we can provide them with that secure base that they need to feel relaxed. So that relationship is really tricky, especially if your horse has had bad experiences, basically like any kind of trauma that they've experienced in their life is going to result in it being really difficult to get back to that horse before they experienced that kind of trauma. And it really also depends on how we show up for that horse. So an example of that is, although we don't wish it on anybody's horses, how we show up and care for them through periods of illness and when they're vulnerable can really drive that relationship and that bond in stronger. So if we can show them that we're there for them to support and care for them when they're in a time of need, the relationship gets stronger. But if they're, like abandoned, neglected, not given that support, not given that relationship, not given that connection, that's when they're going to start putting walls up to kind of protect themselves. And so that's when it's going to be harder to start creating those oxytocin bonds, and it's going to be easier to create mistrust and lose confidence. So the relationship is hard, but that is kind of what we're trying to work towards, is having that oxytocin fire when, you look at each other and when you work with each other and when you're grooming and, all of those day-to-day experiences that you have with your horse, you've got the oxytocin firing. So here's a fun one. Do you hold your horse's attention because you have the treat pouch? So I have absolutely no problems with doing treat-based training and clicker training and positive reinforcement. I love it, and I love teaching it, and I love working with it. But recognizing that the only reason why you're holding your horse's attention is because you have the treats is really important, because it means that when you get into more challenging situations, you're not necessarily going to be able to hold their attention. It's important that you recognize the depth of the relationship and the connection, separate to the quality of training that you're using with the treats as well. So there's the treat-based training definitely goes a long way to developing a relationship and a connection with your horse. And you want to make sure that, again, your horse feels secure and connected within their environment and their herd themselves and their relationship with you. And treat-based training can really help that along, because you're using positive reinforcement rather than negative reinforcement, or if negative reinforcement that they've experienced has escalated to punishment or submission or control, then it can be really good to kind of create a more positive relationship with, for example, the bit pressure, the whip cues, those kinds of things. I like to reshape how my horse responds and thinks about those kind of pressures. So the thing there is can you hold your horse's attention if you don't have the treats? Are they still wanting to seek you out and look at you and follow you, even though they might not get a treat? Are they still going to stand up and relax with you? Are they still going to allow you to groom them? Making sure that you're not leaving gaps in your training because treats work for you, so you don't need to do anything else. Well, the relationship is key. The quality of the connection, the experience of the oxytocin, all of those things are really important. Where I see positive reinforcement and clicker training really shine is it helps the horse owners, riders, and trainers to actually understand how to train cues in and to mark and reward behaviors. Because I think that's one thing that's really lacking in the industry, is thinking about pushing and pressuring and submitting and controlling the horse through the bit and the leg cues. Whereas if you come around more to like positive reinforcement helps you create more of a cue-based training, so you can recognize that you're not necessarily trying to control the horse with the aids, you're just trying to communicate with them through the aids. And so then through that communication, you can build out a whole language with your horse that you wouldn't recognize that you could have otherwise. Same as, that experience of a relationship with your horse. If you've always had, a fear approach with training where you're worried about getting hurt and having to control the horse, then you might not ever see the potential for a horse to actually look after you because you've got a relationship with them. So I recently have been working on this with one of our breakers, a little Arab mare called Sully. And she's a classic Arab mare. She will get her tail up and run around like kite on a string. And we're just in the process of backing her. I can hold her attention for everything, where she can look at me, follow me, stay relaxed around me, consent all of her cues, consent the mounting. And you can sit on her back without her being, upset or worried or concerned. But I can feel that the relationship just isn't quite strong enough for her to really have confidence in me and trust in me when we go into moving around, like walking around and whatnot. So I wanted to create a little bit more of a challenge in a different direction to help kind of show up for her as somebody worth trusting and somebody that she can have confidence in. And so we do this by our in-hand adventures. So taking her on an in-hand adventure, she is young, she hasn't been off the property a whole lot, and so it is a bit scary. The further away from her paddock she gets, the scarier it is. And in this process, we can do two things for her. We can show her how to investigate the things that she's scared of, so that she builds confidence in herself with dealing with scary things. And that also goes in hand with being a good guide for her, for being able to show up as somebody to say, hey, I know that in this situation you're scared, but I'm going to guide you through it, and I'm going to show you how to deal with your fear. And as a result, that is going to form a stronger connection, a stronger bond, and a stronger relationship with her, so that when I circle back around to do the actual full riding process, the relationship is going to be so much stronger. She's going to trust me so much more because I've helped her in this other experience. So being able to be aware of where her attention is and how strong that connection is prevents me from over facing her with the ridden stuff before she's ready. But it also helps give her the skills with how to manage her own emotional state and how to deal with her challenges that are going to come up for her. And it's also going to build in the trust that I am going to come in and guide her through challenging processes, so she can kind of take a deep breath and let me take on the responsibility of that experience. So asking for her attention, it's important to see when she's lost attention. So if we're imagining a spooky Arab mare, they're easily distracted. So the first and most important thing that I'm going to ask for her is her attention is on me and not on the things that are in her environment. And so I can, as we talked, we can ask for her attention. The typical training methods is with the flag, showing awareness of the environment, the depth of the relationship, and the treats. So figuring out which one is your tool of choice and figuring out how you're going to integrate that into your training session to be able to ask for her attention. So the way that we ask for attention is we ask them to stop and show signs of relaxation, and then the fist bump to consent the next ask. So it's important for me to recognize when I lose that quality of connection, because she's starting to look at the things around her and she might be getting her energy up either mostly out of excitement for an adventure, but that really quickly and easily flips over to fear if a dog runs out, or what happened to us on the weekend, the electric gate decided to open and she didn't know the gates moved by themselves, and so that gave her a real shock. So asking for her attention and then challenging it with the scarier things, using this if we can show up well and we can create a positive experience and be a little bit in control of the environment and know what those things are going to be and how to help them through it, we can use this as a way to build that trust and a stronger connection, so that she's more engaged with me and looking for me for support when it comes to being ridden. So it was really important for me to check in with her where she was at emotionally and where her attention is in the easy part. Because if I'm already losing her focus, her attention, and that connection in that place where she feels safe and secure already, I've got no hope when we get to that more challenging place of being in an unknown environment with unknown factors that are going to affect how she responds. One of the things that I teach is that the best way to control a horse is to control the environment. And then through controlling the environment, we can create that connection, that relaxation, that willingness to be with us and working with us, and that consent. And then we want to try and take that into new environments. We want to challenge it slightly, but not enough to create a bad negative experience where they're not brave enough to do it again. That we want them to come out of the situation feeling more confident in themselves, trusting themselves and us more, and feeling braver and more adventurous. If we don't control that environment and we overface them, you can see this if you approach a jump that's too big for your horse to actually do. If you go on a trail ride and the thing that scares them actually hurts them. If you're at a show and something happens to them that actually hurts them, then we're creating a situation where we're going to break the trust and confidence in us, because they have said yes to our ask and they've actually been hurt. And that hurt can be physical, or it can be just an emotional trauma because they've experienced a feeling that they can't manage because it's too much. So what we want to do is we want to be able to hold her attention, guide her through the process, show her how to relax, and then we're trying to say, so stop, relax, look at me, follow me, and then follow me mindfully. So we're making sure that they're not going over the top of us, dropping the shoulder in, nipping at us, that kind of thing. And then I know when I'm really doing well with our connection is when the horse starts asking us questions. So if they start saying, okay, I'm ready for the next ask, if they start getting like little moments of being chuffed in themselves and proud of themselves because they got an answer right, or if they are able to say, hey, I need a break, I'm feeling overwhelmed. So when the horse starts to communicate back to us, that's when I know that our connection work is really coming along. So circling back around to safe horses, this is one experience of how I am going about working with a horse. The breed itself is notoriously considered difficult to work with, but how I'm going to tier and structure our training sessions so that I create a confident horse that understands how to look after its owner. It doesn't mean that there's not going to be accidents. It doesn't mean that, they're not going to have something that's, really going to spook them and tip them over. So if she has a negative experience where a dog comes out and attacks her, then that's going to be really detrimental to her confidence in how she shows up for her human. So there is situations where we can go off the path. And also, how far you're going to be able to challenge your horse. Finish on a positive note, feeling like you could have done more is always really important. Understanding where your horse's cusp is and staying just below it and showing them how to emotionally self-regulate, check in with you, and self-soothe will ensure that you can, push it just that little bit without over-facing them. And then you're creating a positive experience where they come out of it and they get like chuffed in themselves and proud of themselves. Like, oh, I did that. I looked at that scary gate that moved all by itself, and then I checked in on the next gate, which also I was waiting for it to move by itself and I needed to make sure it was fine. Or there was hard rubbish day, so there was like mattresses out on the road. It was actually perfectly timed. So there's plenty of things for her to like practice investigating and being curiously confident. So creating safe horses is about being the person that can guide your horse into building trust, confidence, and self-assuredness within itself to then be able to look after you. If you're asking your horse to look after you and it does not yet have the skills, then you need to be coming back and building out the relationship and the connection first so that you're putting yourself in that position where your horse can look to you to look after you. And then over time, as your horse builds confidence in you and your choices, then they will start to build confidence in themselves. The relationship builds out and they'll start to look after you. So we actually are going to be doing a training on this actual how to build a connection with your horse. We currently have the first 7 training sessions of the course available. It is free. It's online. You can do it at your own pace. You can listen to me talk as much or as little as you want. So you can get that course over at www.equestrianmovement.com/connection, and you can start that training today. And that's going to be digging into all of this that we've just talked about today. And then I'm pretty sure you'd have to sign up to get the dates right. I'm pretty sure it's June 22nd, 23rd, 24th, but I could have those dates completely wrong. We are also going to be doing a live workshop that goes hand in hand with that course training. So we get to work together on building that connection with your horse, figuring out where maybe you and your horse are a little bit stuck and how you can best support your horse to start bringing down those walls, start trusting you, being confident in you, and allowing you to guide them through challenging experiences. But that's it for me today. Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.